You are listening to the ADHD Support Talk Radio podcast. ADHD Support Talk Radio is sponsored by addclasses.com. Sign up now for a free webinar by going to www.addclasses.com. This is your co-host, Tara McGillicuddy, and today I am back with Lynne Edris, our other co-host. And in just a moment, we are going to be talking about the challenges related to getting back on track when you have ADHD and how to kind of deal with those challenges. But before we get started, Lynne, for those people who may not know you, who may be new, can you talk a little bit about yourself?
Absolutely. As Tara said, my name is Lynne Edris. I am a productivity and ADHD coach. I empower overwhelmed professionals to take control of their time and their lives so that they can fulfill their potential and have more time and energy for what matters most to them. You can learn more about me and what I do at www.coachingadvantages.com. And like Tara, I am a woman with ADHD myself. So we definitely get this struggle and what you're struggling with right now.
And like I said, my name is Tara McGillicuddy. I'm the co-host. I help people with ADHD and other types of challenges shift their energy, get back on track, move forward, be more productive. You can learn about me and the services I offer by going to taramcgillicuddy.com. So yeah, Lynne and I were talking about, what should we talk about today? And what came up for me, which I think is so common right now that I think everyone in the world can relate to, not just people with ADHD, is getting back on track. So I thought this is something to talk about. So Lynne, where would you like to begin with this?
I think it's a really timely conversation right now. I mean, as we're recording this, it's the end of July, 2021. So a lot of the world is reopening, hopefully what's kind of at the tail end of the pandemic, I guess we shall see, but I think people are starting to go back to work in their offices. A lot of businesses are reopening as normal. Life's starting to go back to normal. But I think this is something that those of us with ADHD in particular struggle with all the time, right? After a holiday, after an illness, after a vacation, after a crazy busy time. I mean, I can't tell you how many different things in my life, have been interruptions that have somehow or other kind of sent me in the wrong direction. And I felt like I've needed to get myself back on track. It could be really tough for us, don't you think?
Yeah. And I think that is something I've always talked about since I started talking about ADHD, is getting back on track. And yeah, like the examples you gave, but we as a world, we've all the world changed. We were forced into situations. So not only do we have that, we have the typical things that we get off track with anyways, whether it's an illness, buying a new car, having to move, just anything that's changes. So getting back on track. And I think some of us, I don't know if we gave ourselves too much leeway. I don't even know if that's the right term, but I think, life's changed. So I'll get back on track when the world gets back to normal. And it's never going to get back to normal. Things might get back to more normal type or more regular. But yeah, getting back on track is something we're all relating to. And because we have ADHD, I think it's even more intense, or it's impacted us maybe more significantly than the average person.
Absolutely. I would agree with that 100%. I mean, anytime your external structure or your surroundings or your routine or your rhythm or whatever, whatever is your normal life gets interrupted, that's a potential way or a potential time when you may get yourself on track or off track. Sorry. Right now, I think a lot of us have fallen maybe more than just a little off track, right? Yeah. In this kind of crazy time that we've been getting ourselves through. So many people got forced to work from home and they never worked from home before. They didn't have the structures. They didn't have the systems. They didn't have, kind of the boundaries set up or even a physical space set up for themselves to work from home. And then all of a sudden, here they are. And of course, I've worked from home forever, like 15, 17 years, something, probably like 17, maybe more.
Me too.
So I already had that structure. I already had those boundaries. I already kind of figured all of that out. Everyone always says, you're so lucky to work from home. Well, now the rest of the world realizes It's not
Yeah.
all that easy, right? It's hard to draw those boundaries. It's hard to create that structure for yourself. It's hard to get your space set up in a way that it works for you. And
Mhm.
my kids are older now. Like my youngest is in college. So she was here last year, taking all of her classes online. I cannot imagine how parents who have school age kids trying to do online school and all of that and do what they need to do, under these new kind of strange circumstances, we're able to manage. But I think so many of us are really trying to find our way back to something, right? To some
Yeah.
level of functioning or some sort of normalcy, or, find a new way to do the things that were working for us before.
Yeah, so expectations are different. Circumstances are way different.
Mm-hmm.
So let's go back to like February 2020. If you fell off track back then, getting back on track post COVID, post whatever you want to call it, is going to be a little bit different for some of us, a lot different for some of us. So we have
Absolutely.
to reevaluate and redefine what it means to be back on track.
Absolutely. And that's one of the things I always talk about with my clients. Like if you haven't defined, if you're not clear about what, quote, on track means for you, then you're working towards something that more likely than not has some kind of all or nothing thinking behind it, some perfectionistic thinking behind it, and you're probably working to something that's not realistic. So
Yes.
one of the first things I always do with clients is work through like, okay, what does it look like for you? What does on track mean? Like, what does life look like for you when you're on track? What are you doing when you're on track? What is easier for you when you're on track? And what are the things that are kind of those essential things that support you? I always call it your scaffolding, right? Your tools, your systems, whatever it is that are helping you stay on track when you're on track. Because if you're not clear, again, you're going to think, almost all of us with ADHD have that all or nothing thinking stuff, that perfectionism. It's really easy to think that on track means perfect. And if that's your expectation, I mean, you're completely setting yourself up for failure, and you're setting yourself up for frustration, and you're setting yourself up for just, like lots of misery.
And our values may have shifted a bit since.
Absolutely.
Not that, I mean, probably still have similar values because of who we are as people, but like, say, for example, having a perfect clean house, not that any of us with ADHD ever really had that, but
I know
something
those
like that.
people.
Yeah,
Right?
I mean,
I didn't
things
get that
may
gene, but I
have,
know those
you
people.
may care more about spending quality time with those you care about than maybe you did before,
Right.
COVID hit. So our values, our expectations, what we want, what we're choosing to do in life may be a little bit different, a lot different. So that's going to affect getting back on track. Maybe we just decided that the rat race isn't for us anymore, type of thing.
Right.
And we care more about, like I said, spending time with people, living a more peaceful life, being healthy. I mean, a lot of us didn't look at being healthy as like a top goal before, which now, because we all went through this crazy health scare, and some of us still
Absolutely.
going through it, that's significantly more important for many of us than it may have been a year and a half ago.
Absolutely. So that the kind of the theme of defining and redefining what on track means for you is huge, right? And it's okay if whatever you're calling on track is different for you now than it was before COVID, before whatever interruption, before yesterday. I mean, it really doesn't matter. Where you are right now is what matters. So getting clear on, what does it look like when I feel like I'm on track, given where I am right now.
Yes.
And that, given where you are right now, is for almost all of us like pretty different than where we were a year and a half ago.
Yeah. I mean, and even you and I working from home, that was normal before it. We're still reevaluating what it
Absolutely.
means to be back on track. And I had a couple health issues over the last 6 months
Mm-hmm.
where had surgery, I'm okay and all that, but that changed my life significantly. It's just, there's so many different variables. So yeah. And we also, because we went through this pandemic and are still going through the whatever it is, I don't think it's technically a pandemic anymore. We went through this collective, like, psychological trauma.
Right.
So the average person, that affects how their brain works because we're already predisposed to that because we have ADHD. I don't know if we need to give ourselves more of a break. I don't know if that's the correct term, but pay attention to your brain. Pay
Yes.
attention to the fact that we may be more tired than the average person. We may be more overwhelmed, more stressed. And then those of us who actually had COVID, our brains, may be also affected because people who had, the illness, it can COVID brain, they call it. So these are things to really pay attention to and to incorporate into being back on track. Yeah, maybe I want to be places on time like I used to, or maybe I want to have a clutter-free environment like I used to, but it may be different to get there.
Yes, absolutely. So I think that the self-awareness piece is huge, as you're saying, and just like be kind with yourself and look at your expectations. What are you expecting? I mean, I kind of smiled when you said to be on time like I used to be. I mean, I hear clients say all the time, like, I need to get back on track. I need to be at work on time. And I will ask, well, how on time were you before?
Yeah.
Right. And if that was something they struggled with before, it isn't going to magically all of a sudden get better because you didn't have to go anywhere for a year and a half, right? There's work to be done there too. So you have to look at those expectations. And then I think it's so important. And I know, Tara, we've talked about this because I think you and I are alike in a lot of ways. And I think for most of us with ADHD, we don't give ourselves credit for gradual improvement. We don't give ourselves credit for progress. We don't give ourselves credit for getting better at something. We tend to only focus on that thing I always call the gap, right? The gap between where you are now and where you want to be. And we don't give ourselves credit for closing the gap, the effort we're putting into it, and all of that. So if you aren't taking stock of what on track means, and you aren't aware and giving yourself credit for consciously and intentionally the things that you are improving, the things that are getting better, I mean, how are you going to know, first of all, what works for you? And the odds of you getting where you want to go aren't very good because you're going to end up feeling defeated and frustrated and, like you're not making progress at all. I mean, we really have to be intentional about making sure we're checking off, what's the word I'm looking for? Like checking off and really kind of measuring our progress and being able to see that in some way, like tangibly, visually, practically, and consciously.
And this may be a good time because of all the craziness we've gone through in the past year and a half or so to really look at helping somebody else get you back on track. Whether it's, say you were working with a mental health professional years ago and you didn't need that anymore. Maybe now's the time to reevaluate whether it's time to go back to that. Maybe it's time to look at working with a coach or some type of program or joining a support group, whether it's ADHD related or not. I mean, that's something to look at. We were so we were forced into isolation.
Yeah,
I mean, I'm an introvert. I sometimes like to be isolated or by myself, but I was forced into it. So
it's different.
Yeah. Like, if I choose to be by myself, that's great. But what do you mean I can't leave the house? What do you mean?
Absolutely.
No.
Absolutely.
But this is something to really look at, maybe consider, is now a good time to hire a coach, join a program, work with a mental health professional.
Absolutely.
The things to connect with people that can support you in getting back on track.
Absolutely. And helping you remember that you're not alone in this.
Yes.
Right. That's one of the things that I think you and I really always want the people who listen to the podcast, our listeners, our audience, to remember is, if any of this resonates with you, you are one of millions, right? You are not alone in this. You are not alone in the struggle. You are not alone in the challenges. And there are plenty of us out there who, are here to connect with you. There are plenty of professionals out there that are there to support you, there to help you get going in the direction that you want to go. And, whether that's back on track or on a whole new track for yourself.
Yeah. So
very true. Very true.
Is there anything else related to this topic that you haven't brought up or we haven't touched upon, Lynn, that you would like to talk about today?
Gosh, off the top of my head, nothing that I can really think of, but the thing kind of that I just want to underscore more than anything is like, be gentle to yourself right now. This is not easy, and you can't expect to just, jump in, at this place far down the road that, maybe you may or may not have been at before, right? Be gentle with yourself, be kind to yourself. Although it feels like things are getting back to whatever, using my quotey fingers, normal was, they're not, right? And we've all been through a lot. And I think every single person that I've talked to, hundreds, thousands over the last year and a half, although kind of we're all going through this sort of universal thing, it's impacting every single one of us completely uniquely. Yes. Right? Every single one of us have experienced this whole worldwide event very differently in lots of different ways. So, cut yourself some slack, be kind to yourself, be gentle with yourself, give yourself credit, give yourself permission to celebrate the little small changes and improvements that you make, because those are the building blocks of the big changes that last for the long haul.
Yeah, and I definitely want to agree with that. And being gentle with yourself isn't the same as letting things slide. I think I've said that to people before, like, yeah, but if, I don't discipline myself. I'm like, no, it's not that. It's meeting yourself where you are and
yes,
giving yourself a bit of a break. Being gentle with yourself is not the same thing as just like letting it slide and forgetting about it. So that's like one thing that I want to, a great point you brought up, but I want to make sure I clarify, because sometimes people don't want to hear that. They're like, no, I can't give myself a break. I can't. But yeah, we've been through a crazy time.
You have
in order to get back on track and get back to being healthy, productive, happy, we need to meet ourselves where we are. And it's kind of like going through a death in the family or some major life change. This whole year and a half, or however long we've been in it, pandemic event craziness has really affected each and every one of us.
Absolutely.
So that I think is really important.
That is really important. Good point, Tara. Very good.
So I think we're pretty much at the end of today's episode. Anything you want to share before we end today, Lynn?
Be nice to you. Give yourself credit. It's all about self-compassion. And, people love to use the word discipline, having self-discipline. But remember, the word discipline comes from the root of the word disciple, and that is to teach. It is not to punish. It is to teach. So don't beat yourself up. We don't change behavior that way. Nobody does, but especially those of us with ADHD. If beating yourself up and self-flagellation worked, you wouldn't be listening to this podcast.
Exactly.
So try something different. Be nice to you for a change. Be gentle with you. And like Tara said, meet yourself where you are right now.
And what is your website address?
Again, my name is Lynne Edris. You can contact me, see what I do, all that good stuff at www.coachingadvantages.com.
Okay. And my name is Tara McGillicuddy. You can learn more about me at taramcgillicuddy.com. And if you'd like to continue this discussion, come join us over in the Facebook community. There should be a link in the description. If you don't see it, go to ADHDsupporttalk.com and click on the community link. Thanks again, everyone.
Thank you.